When Germany invaded Belgium, May 1940, British and French troops rushed in to stop the German onslaught. Yet did you know that both British and French troops also entered the Netherlands once the German invasion had started? This here is the story of the forgotten Allied assistance during the Battle of the Netherlands, May 1940. Keep watching. Welcome back everyone. If this is your first time here, I'm Stefan, I'm a Dutch history teacher and I like to make videos about history for you. If you find it interesting as well, consider subscribing, hit the notification bell, and if you want to support me additionally, you can do so via Patreon or via PayPal. The links are in the description. Just like at the beginning of the First World War, the Dutch government took a position of neutrality. Dutch military commanders, however, were not so sure that if another war would break out in Europe, the Netherlands could remain neutral. See, the original German von Schlieffen plan included an invasion through the Netherlands. The Germans deviated from the plan. Dutch General Reinders wasn't convinced that the Netherlands would be lucky again this time. The Dutch army was lacking professional staff, training and war material. Reinders proposed draconic plans to reinforce the army with the purchase of artillery, anti-aircraft guns, anti-tank guns, aircraft and tanks. Years of budget cuts made these plans hard to realize. Then, on the 28th of August 1939, actually a few days before the German invasion of Poland, the Dutch army mobilized. Chief of General Staff Reinders got supreme command over land and sea forces. Even before his nomination, Reinders argued with members of the government and the Ministry of Defense how an ideal defense had to be realized. Several lines of defense had to be reinforced. There was the IJssel line, the Grebbelinie and the New Holland water line. Tensions between Reinders and the Dutch government mounted, and on the 31st of January 1940, Reinders resigned. He was replaced by General Henry Winkelman. With the limited resources he had, he chose for the Grebbelinie as the main line of defense. The areas in front of the line were inundated, flooded, too deep to cross by vehicle, but too shallow to cross by boat. The Grebbeberg was, due to its higher ground, open for a German ground attack. When Winkelman left his office at midnight on the 9th of May 1940, he said to his colleague, "Now the gentlemen, the Germans, can come. We have done everything we can. I'm going home to catch a few hours of sleep." 4 hours later, the first German troops crossed the border. The German invasion of the Netherlands had begun. The first German troops that crossed the border were actually troops in disguise. They were dressed as Dutch police troops. Most of these patrols were intercepted by Dutch border guards. A few made it through to the IJssel line only to see that the bridges had been blown up in front of them. Some skirmishes did take place, after which the Dutch defenders retreated to the Grebbelinie according to plan. The Germans pushed to the north and the south of the country pretty unopposed. The Pilraam line was breached within a day. Air raids were carried out on specific targets and paratroopers were dropped near Dordrecht, Rotterdam and Den Haag. Den Haag, they were defeated. The Battle of the Grebbeberg lasted till May 13th. The Germans broke through there, but in the north they did not manage to push through across the Afsluitdijk. Also, German air landing troops got pinned down at Rotterdam and were not able to cross the bridges there. On the 14th, Rotterdam was bombed, and the next day the Dutch unconditional surrender was a fact, with an exception of the southwestern province of Zeeland, which capitulated later. Some people claim that, unlike neutral Belgium, the Netherlands had to fend for itself once the Germans invaded, but this isn't fully true. See, the Allies promised military support in case of a German attack, and guess what? The support did arrive. Let's look at these operations. Already on the 10th of May, a British 95-man strong demolition crew arrived to destroy objects useful for the Germans. 2 days later, a 200-man strong marine detachment arrived. Its commander promised a larger battalion would arrive soon. On the night, 12th to the 13th of May, Dutch troops stationed in Hoek van Holland saw British ships approaching the Dutch coast. 2 British transport ships that were escorted by a destroyer arrived in the port of the Hoek van Holland. A battalion of Irish Guards under command of Lieutenant Colonel Hayden disembarked. His orders were to assist the Dutch at Den Haag and read as follows. In supporting these operations, you will perform any duty assigned to your battalion, if you consider it a reasonable wartime operation. You will not, however, come under his, the local Dutch commander's, orders and will not hesitate to refuse requests for help which, in your opinion, entail the useless sacrifice of your people. If the Dutch government would leave Den Haag, the British troops had to pull back to Hoek van Holland to be evacuated from there. Now looking at his orders with words like, in your opinion, entail a useless sacrifice of your people, well, that's a rather flexible assignment. It basically came down to the British commander on the spot who decided if, when and where action was to be undertaken. And this would lead to disappointment among Dutch troops who hoped that the proverbial cavalry had arrived. Where it came down to was Commander Hayden refused any requests of the Dutch and he basically took up positions around Hoek van Holland. He refused to advance to Den Haag. And when he learned Den Haag was safe because the Germans were defeated at the Battle of Ypenburg, he saw no reason to go there anyway. He did not want to send troops to Rotterdam, a city in the front line by now, because he believed that the city was in no danger. Now he believed the French had captured the Moerdijk bridges, which they hadn't, so he acted on wrong information. According to Dutch testimonies, the morale of the British troops in Hoek van Holland was very poor. British warships, on the other hand, were willing to provide fire against the attackers. The Dutch then asked the British troops to help them to attack the German positions in the Staalduinse Bossen, a nearby forest where remnants of German airborne troops were holding up. The British refused to do so and the Dutch had to carry out the attack themselves. A few of the Germans were killed, others were captured and others escaped. On the 13th of May, German bombers harassed the British troops stationed at Hoek van Holland and this caused panic among their ranks, especially when rumors began to spread that Rotterdam had fallen and the German troops were on their way. Well, Rotterdam hadn't fallen yet, it would be bombed the next day. The British troops embarked on their ships before the order came from London. The orders came at 12 hours 30, only to be revoked 40 minutes later, but due to the orders they had, they were allowed to leave. And thus ended the British help during the German invasion of the Netherlands. Let's take a look at the French. Were the French any better? Well, you may be surprised. The French appeared in 2 Dutch provinces once the German invasion of the Netherlands commenced. The province of Noord-Brabant and the province of Zeeland. Let's take a look at Noord-Brabant first. The main German thrust came through Noord-Brabant in order to make it to the Moerdijk bridges and then reach Dordrecht and then push on to the heart of the Netherlands. The French troops that entered Noord-Brabant belonged to the French 7th Army and were under command of Henri Honoré Giraud. Before the German attack, Giraud envisioned a French-British-Dutch-Belgian front, but as we know now, nothing came of it. Yet the French did undertake an attempt. Giraud was aware that the Dutch forces in Noord-Brabant were very weak and needed to be reinforced. Also because he did not hold the Dutch army in high regard, when in the early morning of May 10th, 1940, he was informed, he ordered his troops to rush through Belgium to the Netherlands. The French troops were under direct command of Lieutenant Colonel Lestacroix. They were held up by Dutch barricades and this caused great annoyances, but by the evening they reached the city of Breda and met with the local Dutch commander Schmidt. Lieutenant Colonel Lestacroix informed Schmidt that they were coming to defend Noord-Brabant. He also stated that both his units would choose a position behind the Wilhelmina Canal between Tilburg and Oosterhout. Schmidt was requested to position itself between Tilburg and the Belgian border, and on the south side the Belgian 18th Division would link up again at Turnhout. This was in line with the instruction given to the 7th Army. They would not deploy further than Tilburg, and after a few things were agreed, the French delegation left. The meeting and the general organization on site left a bad impression with Lesterquoy, who held the Dutch in low regard. He also expressed his negativity towards a Belgian liaison officer he had picked up on the way, who served as an interpreter. When the French troops witnessed the Dutch troops retreating from the Peel-Raam line, negativity increased. Some French even spoke of the Dutch as traitors, crowds of the north. Dutch commander Schmidt then relocated his HQ to Breda, but once he got there, he found the place to be abandoned. He therefore rushed back to Tilburg, but he missed a turn. He therefore ran into the enemy and was captured. Because of the German breakthrough further south, the French commander Gamelin decided to let his forces take up positions near Breda and keep the Germans from getting to Antwerp in Belgium and Zeeland. Developments in Belgium, the Allied troops pulled back to the Deal line, made the French positions untenable. They pulled back and performed some rear guard action. The German advance towards the Moerdijk bridges and Dordrecht wasn't threatened for a moment. Now, the French did undertake a weak attempt to attack the bridgehead at the Moerdijk, but this failed miserably. The French proceeded so cautiously that the Germans were given hours to call in the Luftwaffe, who bombed the French away at the cost of 32 Dutch civilians and a dozen of French casualties. Noord-Brabant was already given up by Winkelmann before the German invasion started, but maintaining Brabant was vital for a possible Dutch-Allied cooperation. And so was Zeeland, and the French troops there, they saw more action. French troops entered Zeeland as soon as the German invasion of the Netherlands started. They were led by Marcel Deslaurent. A detachment that was sent to Walcheren Island was led by General Durand. Once he arrived, Durand was disappointed by the weak-looking Dutch garrison. He and the local Dutch commander could not agree on a joint plan of defense. The center of defense was to be set up in Walcheren and Zuid-Beveland. Two lines of defense were set up, the Bad line and the Zandijk line, where the latter was the main line of defense. The other islands were barely defended at all. Durand argued the location of the main line at the Zandijk was wrong. He feared the Germans would bypass the line via Tolen and make an amphibious attack on Zuid-Beveland. Reports began to arrive on the 12th of May and caused unrest among the Dutch troops. On the 14th, German artillery hit the Bad line, and this caused panic among the defenders, which resulted in a rout. This obviously made a demoralizing impact on the defenders further west, located at the Zandijk line. And on top of all that, soon reports came in of the unconditional surrender of the Netherlands, except for the soldiers stationed in Zeeland. They had to fight on because the Allied troops needed time to evacuate the province. And thus the Dutch defenders in Zeeland had to fight on. Soon French reinforcements did arrive. But these French troops did not join the Dutch at the Zandijk line, but at a canal behind it, as well as in the north of Zuid-Beveland. The Zandijk line fell on May 15th. On the 16th and 17th, Tolen and Schouwen-Duiveland were taken by the Germans with some minor skirmishes here and there. The French were optimistic about their defenses of Walcheren, located at Sloedam, because it was separated from Zuid-Beveland by a long narrow dam. On the 17th, a German attack was repelled by the French. What followed was an artillery duel that lasted whole day. During these barrages, the historical city center of Middelburg was flattened. Luftwaffe raids on French positions lowered morale to a point that when the Germans made the crossing, the French either surrendered or fled. Dutch detachments stationed there had already pulled back. and thus Walcheren was for the taking. Some skirmishes did occur here and there, but the Dutch troops of the 38th Regiment Infantry didn't resist any longer. But this endangered the French naval retreat. French rear guard fighting led by General Marcel de Laurent ensured its successful French retreat. De Laurent fought till the end and was killed in action. That night, the city of Vlissingen surrendered. Zeeuws-Vlaanderen was not heavily defended after this. The French retreated and some Dutch troops joined them. On May 19th, the last active Dutch troops left the Netherlands. Thanks to my patrons, you see their names right now. And a special thanks to Thomas Zabiega, Damian Wallace, Connor, Philip Jordan, Marcus Kaas, Nick Terranova, Haley, Mark Littlehill, Janusz Dozinkiewicz, Joanne, Justin Tabell, Tanya Dixie, Henry Clarkson, Rob Park, Andrea Marti, Susanna Di Bella, John Beach, Fabrizio, Wayback History, Fernando Lopez Ojeda, Luis Pichera, and Mike West. If you want to learn more about the Battle of Den Haag, I made a video on that on location. You can click right here. And if you're interested in the Dutch perspective on the German occupation of the Netherlands, you can click right here. And thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, share this video with a friend, and I see you later.